kind of like, we wanted this to go very till here, because it's well so many, and also because no one is going to come in, so.
Introduction. Agriculture is our sole source of food. This technology is so old and so embedded in our culture that it becomes invisible, to the point we don't even perceive it as a technology anymore. At the same time, our food chains based on industrialized agriculture are one of the main driving forces behind climate crisis. New technologies could revolutionize our food chains, breaking our dependency on the logistic of agriculture. For the first time in 12,000 years old history of civilization, we are able to think an alternative future in which we don't rely on soil cultivation, feedstock breeding, and annual rhythm of crops growing and harvest. This could turn out to be life-saving in times of climate crisis, when crops that whole population depends on are being challenged by droughts and extreme weather. The revolution in biotechnology allows us to base our food chains locally, first in batches of cultured meat, bacterial protein, and in a longer perspective to become bioreactors ourselves, liberating us from the need to consume in order to thrive. It would shift our diet from consuming the other into consuming with the other. We have never been individuals. If, as biologist Scott Gilbert tells us, there is more microbial cells in our bodies than human ones, then which individual are we? The main challenge of this transition is noticing the complex web of codependent microbial connection, and once means of sustenance are abundant, find a meaningful way of spending our free time. What would you do if the basic income you need would be provided internally by your own holobiotic community? Currently, human is the most exploited animal, and it's the only animal that exploits itself in order to compete with other individuals in meritocratic rat race.
My name is Marek, and I'm a designer and researcher. And my current practice is centered around storytelling, because I think the stories we tell each other is a very powerful way to influence our behavior and the way we see our place in the world. And my project has started with a research on singularity and transhumanism, and how do we imagine the immense future we have upon us as merging together with technology and with becoming this cyborg, becoming this robots. And I decided to stand against it because I think bacteria and biological cells are very powerful way to reconnect with the non-human others. And really my project called Plurality Now is about appreciating the current plurality that we have right now, and it's a struggle to keep this ecological diversity. And I hope that by making people realize that they are an environment within themselves, they're gonna start to think about environment as something that is not distance from them, but it's very close, that they are part of the environment and part of the nature. And the way how we could achieve that is, I think, by food, because it's such a strong sensual way to achieve this, as well as way easier to talk through these senses and through this microbial fermented foods to get this understanding of yourself as a microbial being. So without talking about numbers, so I was really hoping to have this intuitive understanding for people that I can share.
Bacteriocene. We are now living in a new geological epoch called Anthropocene. It marks the moment in which humankind becomes a planetary force shaping the Earth's crust. It connects two notions, which we usually think are distinct: geology and humanity. However, we will argue that the epoch contains inside a mega-epoch that includes them all, the Bacteriocene. Since the beginning of life on Earth, bacteria became omnipresent, penetrating each habitat. They were the first to shape the Earth's geological structure and enable the more complicated life forms that came later. Let's recall the first major climate catastrophe, the release of oxygen by cyanobacteria. These microscopic organisms living in the ocean were the first ones to consume the carbon from the carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere and release oxygen back. This must have been experienced as a catastrophe for current anaerobic organisms. Yet, this event allowed the development of all further eukaryotic life. We evolved because of past climate change. Furthermore, we know that multicellular life was formed by multiple bacteria in a process called endosymbiosis, described by pioneering work by Lynn Margulis in 1966. The core of endosymbiosis theory is that new kinds of cells, organs, and species come to life by long-lasting intimacy of the strangers. The modern complicated cell was formed by encapsulating symbiotic bacteria together. This assemblage evolved together withstanding environmental pressure to form the biodiversity we know. The dense bacterial network enables complex life forms and enhances their evolution. This is why we will insist on noticing the Bacteriocene as the primary geological epoch and understanding the importance of protozoa in our daily life. Bacteria infiltrate the totality of life on Earth. It should not be a surprise then that humans were found to be holobionts themselves, with bacterial cells outnumbering the human ones inside our bodies. Symbiosis is a term for symbiotic creating together. It shows that there is no such thing as a self-made man, as the myth of meritocracy would like us to believe. It challenges any notion of self-made and self-emerging. This is only codependence, co-emergence, and coexistence. This is why we update our understanding of social structure with current biological knowledge. If we look at the current neoliberal system through this lens, we can see that it is indeed putting humans into symbiotic interdependence already. Humans are appearing as cells building the neoliberal superorganism. However, this system is wrong because it operates at the cost of nature, ruining its own sustenance. It operates by the rules of the algorithm of agriculture. There is no coffee on a dead planet is one of the mottos of Extinction Rebellion, a global movement for environmental justice. This means that in case of ecosystem collapse, even money won't be able to buy goods that are just not able to be produced anymore.
My name is Marek, and I'm the author behind Plurality Now. I would like to get to know you, so please have a look at the project and leave me some comments or contact me through the series of live chats, live streams, or find me at Plurality Now Instagram or Facebook. Let's meet each other. Hope to hear from you soon.
All right, great. Hi, both of you. Glad you could make it. Great. Well, you know me, I'm Coltrane. Maybe could you guys give a little bit of an introduction about yourselves and your practice? And then we can jump into things. Ezra?
Yep. My name's Ezra Lloyd Jackson. I'm a multidisciplinary designer artist, but I'm training right now as a perfumer's assistant and lab assistant with Olfaction Laboratories in the UK. Been there for nearly 3 years now. I'm working my way up. That's me.
Great.
I'm Norrie McBride. I'm the curator for the Scent and Society lecture series at the Institute of Art and Olfaction. And I'm also an independent perfumer, and I'm a researcher that's mainly looking at olfactive culture and the fragrance trade and how it affects society. So,
Amazing.
me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. And yeah, let's begin. I think I just wanted, one of my questions was, I was really interested in, from both of your perspectives, what do you kind of see as the landscape of the scent at the moment, either through perfumery? Say we were having that conversation, Ezra, about big fragrance companies, and then maybe from a bit more sociological, historical perspective, Norrie. Yeah, maybe Norrie, do you want to start?
So where I see the landscape right now, I think a lot of cultural practices, especially in the sort of developed sphere, developed economies, have really been pushed into either being something very obscure or being a product. And everything's sort of seen through the lens of a commodity right now. How can it be commodified? Is it profitable to be commodified? And so you see a lot of traditional practices that have gone on the wayside. The making of, pomanders, for instance. There's no economic it's not an economically viable option for a commodity, so you really don't see them anymore, which is unfortunate that so much of the gaze has been turned into a product. But we still see outside of that context, I'm almost a pull back and forth in a lot of scent cultures that are outside of the developed economies, where there's a mix of both wanting the sort of aspirations that conventional Western style perfumery offer, that you'll smell rich, you'll smell like $1,000,000, right? That it will connect you to this sort of cultural hub that seems accessible through these products. But then at the same time, there's also a pull for traditional cultures, traditional ways of scenting, and and if we look at the case of oud, the opportunity to maybe pull a traditional product into the mainstream and make it mainstream. And what does that mean? And that's kind of a pull back and forth. So that's kind of on the cultural side where I see things. And I think on the business side of things, I think there's a big move related to environmentalism. How can we secure product? How can we seem green? Maybe if we're not green, what does green mean? That's, when I read the scenting, and and if we look at the case of oud, the opportunity to maybe pull a traditional product into the mainstream and make it mainstream. And what does that mean? And that's kind of a pull back and forth. So that's kind of on the cultural side where I see things. And I think on the business side of things, I think there's a big move related to environmentalism. How can we secure product? How can we seem green? Maybe if we're not green, what does green mean? That's, when I read the trade magazines, that seems to be the themes that keep coming up over and over again. But I don't know, maybe Ezra, you have a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, just leaning off the back of what you're saying about commodifying things, oud is like a really interesting example. Or maybe interesting is not the right word, but it's a quite particular or peculiar example because of it's a kind of running joke being on the behind the scenes of how fragrance is made, how much real oud actually goes into a lot of perfumes because of its price. But again, it's just the kind of by proximity of it smelling, of what is used, it's smelling similar. People immediately, their imagination goes straight to that, and they project, this is this sometimes exotic thing. That might be their view. And I think that says again a lot about how culture is commodified now, and fragrance is a kind of distilled way of seeing that happen, of this kind of intention. Or this tendency rather to hustle culture and to again commodify elements of cultures. Yeah, I mean, being behind the scenes of like coming from retail as well, you'd see that a lot in various sectors where people would kind of again pick a certain cultural motif, even if it's not theirs, to run off of. And now with the experience of being in a lab and again, like actually seeing the material itself that evokes that stereotypical thought, maybe there's a strong kind of there's a strong sense of sorry, trying to find the words. There's a definite tendency, and fragrance does that in a quite unique way.
With a question about the commodification of oud, does it come, say, from a Eurocentric commodification, or was it, say, from the UAE? Did that sort of generate this sort of exoticization and value?
Yeah,
Western markets?
I think it's definitely from a European lens. Again, just like the fact that it's not even real oud often, is a kind of example of that. But
I think you had early boutique houses come out like Amouage that became incredibly popular, not just in the Middle East, but elsewhere. And it gave the Western industry a taste of, this type of perfumery is popular. And it kind of also woke them up the idea that there's a Middle Eastern market that wants perfume, that consumes far more perfume than the Western market does. I think it's something like 3 times the rate. So it became, how can we sell to that market? How can we put products in that market to create competition from traditional sellers that were already there? And then why they already sort of had those products, they're like, well, we'll put them out here. And you'll see that the products that get marketed towards the Middle East tend to have more real oud, or they tend to be the much higher brand, higher marked prices that will have the better quality. Whereas the facsimiles, the accords of oud, because a lot of Western noses also don't have an association with it, it's just sort of woody smelling, you can kind of get away with more of a sketch of what oud is, as opposed to trying to make something that's exact. So yeah, I think they saw what was going on, and then we're like, oh, this we can make money.
Definitely jumping on that. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe to add to that, so what do you see are like major areas of critique or problems within this sort of environment, or that, like, I mean, I'm already seeing a big problem, say, in the relationship Eurocentric fragrance industry has to other parts of the world. But perhaps you might have some more to shed on that. Ezra?
Yeah, I mean, I think the critique is right now small. There's not too many people, I think, really having upfront conversation, and beyond the conversation side is the action, I think, is quite minimal. There's some organizations that Nuri and I actually went to a conference with, the Global Frankincense Alliance, where they're trying to build direct dialogues, and not monologues, not Eurocentric monologues, dialogues between exporters, indigenous peoples, people on the ground, people in the diaspora. And I think that's really positive. That's a really positive step. So that's an example of the kind of shift away from this Eurocentric disconnect with the kind of, Western imagination and maybe the fetishization of other cultures through smell. I think it is about trying to build that direct link that comes down to trade, tangible stuff.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see that. But again, the conversation is still relatively in its early days, and a lot of things still need to be figured out. I think, again, how things can work on a pragmatic level, and again, work away from the neo-colonial structures that they're kind of set out on. Maybe, Rory, you could expand on that some more.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel that and look, we both work in this industry. We love this industry. So I think that's kind of important. We love what we do, but we also have to recognize what it is and where some of its history has been, and ask that it be better. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People can get very defensive sometimes, but we have to, I think, at the very least, recognize that the perfume trade was built on colonialism. It's one of the oldest global trades that really relied on the colonial structure and then the post-colonial structure. Because if we're looking at natural materials, the majority of them are not made in Western Europe and North America and Australia. There are some, of course, but you even if we're talking about roses in Egypt, and roses in Bulgaria, the power structure is not even there in how those products get to market, in how they're valued. And we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that the majority of people who are taking an enormous amount of the risk as far as growing naturals, distilling naturals, doing the early stages of the middlemen work, are usually people of color, and they are not getting nearly as much of the rewards of these products, to the point where it barely seems to trickle down. And there's not a lot of transparency in those lines of communication. How do you get from what's in the bottle to the person who picked the patchouli leaf, how do we track that process? There are companies that do that with some of their materials internally, but those things are not usually made available to the consumer. And I think we live in an age where consumers want that. We're seeing that in other avenues of consumer products. In chocolate, people want to know where their chocolate's coming from. So I think that is a major issue. I think what scares the industry, however, isn't so much the human costs or the human issues within it, but the environmental issues. I think they're very concerned about climate change. We've had disruptions to systems that we thought were going to be in place for a very long time, where materials we always had would disappear. We wouldn't have them from one batch to another, or the quality would be very different. So I think they're, on an industry side of things, they're thinking very long term about climate change and how do we reposition or change our models to handle that towards of these products, to the point where it barely seems to trickle down. And there's not a lot of transparency in those lines of communication. How do you get from what's in the bottle to the person who, picked the patchouli leaf? How do we track that process? There are companies that do that with some of their materials internally, but those things are not usually made available to the consumer. And I think we live in an age where consumers want that. We're seeing that in other avenues of consumer products. In chocolate, people want to know where their chocolate's coming from. So I think that is a major issue. I think what scares the industry, however, isn't so much the human costs or the human issues within it, but the environmental issues. I think they're very concerned about climate change. We've had disruptions to systems that we thought were going to be in place for a very long time, where materials we always had would disappear. We wouldn't have them from one batch to another, or the quality would be very different. So I think they're, on an industry side of things, they're thinking very long term about climate change and how do we reposition or change our models to handle that so that it's profitable for the companies that it still remains profitable for. But naturals are always going to be part of this industry. And this is an element that I also think needs as much, if not more, attention, because it's more tangible. It's here and it's now. Climate changes as well, but I think these are the two big pillars that the industry really needs to focus on.
And I think you're right. And then something that, as we mentioned, it requires more of a holistic or like integrated approach related to naturals. Because as I was reading a bit into biotech fragrance, and one of the main key, like we get to bypass, trade disputes around products, political disputes, climate problem. So it seems like this push into biotech fragrance isn't necessarily, well, of course it's marketed sustainably, but it's also to jump over those sort of uncomfortable social problems that they may not want to necessarily deal with. But I think if you do want to continue having naturals products, especially as the world continues to change, that you do have to start engaging within that sort of,
Definitely. I mean, just to pick up on what Nuri was saying as well, for good reason, there is a lot of, intellectual property in the industry is kept super guarded. And there are a lot of, kind of secrets kept naturally just out of process, out of materials that are used and how they're used. And again, don't get me wrong, there is an amazing quality to how these materials can interact as a design and artistic medium, and constantly finding new ways to engage naturals with synthetics and vice versa is, a massively fascinating and interesting thing as a way to kind of play with memory as a sculpting tool. But at the same time, the transparency, I think, not just the lack of transparency in certain ways between perfumers and between, again, with the IP safeguarding, that does kind of transpire to also how things are spoken about, again, within the trade and within different layers and levels of the supply chain, but also as well for people trying to get in and engage with the industry. I think it's very difficult, for certain people from depending on your socio-economic background or your ethnic background. It's very difficult to engage at any level And again, as Nuri mentioned, there is a clear global imbalance of people of color generally being the people who actually start the entire process, but are compensated the least. But yeah, again, even, you know, just to give myself an example, if perfumery was never a topic of discussion for me growing up, you know, it was never like, oh yeah, my granddad did it, so it's here's the framework kind of thing. Not at all. It's definitely been something I've found on my own, but again, it's there are just levels and problems of access on multiple tiers within the industry that I see. Yeah.
Even language. So much of the industry
oh my
still
God.
remains in French. And that's really so that it is a bit of a control. We can control how much of the information gets out. And there's certain, you know, there's certain trade magazines that are just not available in English or German or other languages. And that if you don't speak French, you are at a disadvantage in this.
Very French thing to do.
Yeah, or polished Queen's English even. Like you need a dictionary review to understand.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you really need English now as well. So, you know, if you were a perfumer in India, and if you don't feel absolutely comfortable, or Bangladesh, anywhere, you don't feel absolutely comfortable in English and absolutely comfortable to a certain degree in French, you're going to have limits to how much you can access, even just trade knowledge. You know, how to do basic things, how to access basic elements of this community. You're going to be at a disadvantage. So it makes it access to education is a very hard thing in this industry, and part of it is because we cannot protect our products through the law in traditional ways. Like we can't copyright them or do these types of. If we had written a book or story, we would have different types of ways of preserving our rights to them, but we don't legally. So it creates and kind of traditionally has always had a very air of like, you don't talk about your formulas, you don't talk about where you get your supplies, like that's love. That's true. Like we are truly friends if I tell you where I get something. Like for real, because people don't. I mean, they simply don't, because where there are no protections. But in this day and age, you can put anything in a gas chromatograph and find out what it is. You know, if I have the lab equipment, I can put any perfume and I can get a pretty good readout of basically what's in there, and I can start tinkering and, you know, reverse engineering from there. So the age of that actually providing us any security to our creative process is over, and has been over for 30 years now. So we need to find new ways of protecting our products and protecting our right to create and to have some semblance over what we create, and also having transparency in the whole process. And we as an industry, and I certainly can't speak for the whole industry, but it feels that we don't have a clear way forward in how to do that, how to regulate that.
Interesting. So it seems like, because then that sort of model would favor, say, bigger companies who can then just produce multiple different scents at a time and take the loss if someone is trying to mimic their fragrance. But say for a smaller scale perfume house, your intellectual property is within the bottle, and then everything that you sell, you inevitably run the risk that it can then be taken over, reconstituted.
I mean, that's why there's such an emphasis on very unique labels and very unique packaging, because we can copyright that. And we can fight those fights better than we can fight for our juices. But I mean, there's been many times where people have made the accusation that such and such bigger house has perhaps stolen from a smaller house, but it's very hard to prove that in court or to protect yourself legally in any way if that does actually happen.
Yeah,
they never admit to it, of course. So.
But that's it. As you said, there isn't the framework for these kind of things. It just hasn't been in place, because I think, again, historically there was no access for, you know, someone who has an interest, like a keen interest in fragrance, to just get up and make it. And now, again, seeing that big shift, as you were saying, with the fact that you can literally display nearly all of everything that's in a fragrance if you have the right equipment, that the industry hasn't caught up to that yet. And again, I can't speak on everything. I've only been in it for 3 years, but just from the conversation I've has an interest, like a keen interest in fragrance, to just get up and make it. And now, again, seeing that big shift, as you were saying, with the fact that you can literally display nearly all of everything that's in a fragrance if you have the right equipment, that the industry is almost hasn't caught up to that yet. And again, I can't speak on everything. I've only been in it for 3 years, but just from the conversation I've had and what I've observed, again, there's this, it seems in many ways, from the diversity to access, is still playing catch up, you know, to many other creative industries. Yeah.
Well, well, great. I think, yeah, so to move from there, I was interested in, do you see any potential avenues for new interventions or new ways of engaging, either within this industry, or what are, say, solutions out of it that you've been thinking about or observed?
I mean, we're looking at him.
Maybe I was lining up that question.
No, for real. Your project really, I think, outlines something super important of just proactivity and being committed and going straight for it rather than just thinking about it, trying to make the best out of a situation like a pandemic. I mean, yeah, I think you definitely show proactivity and kind of gave an example of like, wow, there are alternative ways of thinking about how we can source things. And depending on the scale, again, as you were saying, maybe not to a super huge economic scale, but maybe that's not the way we could start to think about it yet. It's not at that point to try and remodel, you know, huge giants in this industry. Maybe we do just have to try and figure out smaller approaches for now, which can build up, just to kind of spin a perspective on it as well.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I think. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. No,
yeah, just like, sorry. No, I was just to add, like, yeah, I agree with you. I think on scaling up, it's not necessarily scaling up, but scaling across laterally in different areas at different sort of levels of what that sort of can look like. Yeah, I think the idea to always mimic the industrial scale or global capitalist model, you will never, and is that really the model that we want to sort of embrace continuously? Yeah. Sorry, Mary, you were going to say something.
No, it was perfect. I would just kind of add to that is that I kind of feel like we're already in an era for this industry moves very, very slowly. In a lot of ways, it's almost medieval or early Renaissance in the way certain things are handled, and certain handshakes, right? It hasn't changed. How we teach other. I mean, there are more avenues now for teaching, but for a very long period of time, you had to find a perfumer, whether through your company or through apprenticeships like we did, who's willing to invest in your education, and it is an investment. It's a huge investment. It's not you can go to your local university and get a course in perfumery, and we've already, I think, started to see these huge disruptions in one, just having the internet. And I don't think it's a surprise that we see the growth, I mean, and I put growth in commas, of the sort of niche market at a time where the internet exploded. Because you had the traditional trade side of things still controls 90% of the market. But, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they controlled like 97% of the market. And that growth of these small independent houses came out of the ability for smaller producers to access raw materials and to access, more importantly, to access customers. And they're still somewhat linked into the traditional trade, because a lot of times we're getting materials, sometimes completely from these bigger companies. So we're sort of also a customer to them, but it's also an area of incredible creative growth. And things tend to go into the niche kind of independent sphere as an incubator. And you see the trade now kind of looks at it as an incubator to see, where are the trends going? What are the kind of avant-garde things going to be? And you see a huge range of products. So I think having that access of the internet and having this kind of spirit of independence combined with more avenues for teaching, and it's still limited, but the fact that, you know, when the Institute of Art and Olfaction first opened up, there wasn't a lot of places where you could take a one-off course on how to build a rose accord in English. That wasn't something that you could do with a trained person who knew what they were doing, who could give you good information. That wasn't as readily available as is now. And there's lots of opportunities for education now. It's still not great, and we still need lots of certification. And you know, I would love to see it become like cosmetic chemistry. I mean, there are universities that specialize in cosmetic chemistry that are completely separated from trade, and you can get a degree in cosmetic chemistry. And I just feel that perfume chemistry should be right along with that. And hopefully, hopefully we will one day. It's kind of crazy that we don't. But I think what's going to be sort of the next stage of this sort of disruption is to have, especially with these very flexible, smaller perfumers who can respond very quickly to the market, and they have to, because they're very sensitive. They don't have the same resilience, is to start having or trying to get more access directly, particularly with naturals. There's only so many places we can go for synthetic compounds, right? There's a handful of labs. We all know the labs. We're going to go to one of them. Yeah. But to be able to access those raw materials directly I mean, this is something I do in my own brand, and it's incredibly challenging, and you have to have a lot of skill set to be able to do that. It's not something that's easily available to most brand owners, but it provides a value add to your customers that they actually want to see. I know who grew my roses. Yeah. I went there and picked them, you know, like I can tell you where my rose oil comes from. And that's something that I think has a lot of value. And I think we're going to see a greater influx of that. And I think we're going to see a greater influx of people who are doing the work on the ground, those who have access to means like the internet, that have the infrastructure already there, that are going to try to access the market themselves. I think you're going to see things like, you know, rose products coming out of Bulgaria. I think you're going to see more of that just directly. People are going to distill, because there's distillers right there. Like they pick the roses, they distill the roses, they happen in the same villages. There's no reason why they can't pull a couple of kilos of rose oil and then make their own products and sell their own products online.
It's how kind of how grass started itself. So why can't that model exist in other countries? Why does it have to go to France to become something when it was the same like spirit of how things began there? I think what I was thinking is like, would you think like certain decades were characterized by like big scents or aquatic, or would the say shift now be also, maybe if you can speculate on the trend in scent, that it's more about transparency? And I don't necessarily mean in the actual fragrance, but maybe that the fragrance itself is a bit more stripped down.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. You know, working in London. Molecule One perfumery. But I mean, again, then you have like, you know, again, another. This is just like pop music perfume, Santal 33. I used to work in a nightclub, so you know that was.
I smell it everywhere.
Active.
Everywhere. This is the, you know,
that started supposedly as a candle fragrance. So it's got this very linear block kind of shape to it. It starts as one shape and just kind of continues as that noise for a while. And not looking at it, it's a you know, it wouldn't be as popular as it is if it wasn't well crafted. And I think taking traditionally a candle fragrance, putting in a perfume is interesting as well. Not the first time, but it's interesting. But yeah, so I think it depends on where you are. I think there are, as Nuri is saying though, you know, what Nuri, what you're doing is, I think, is like a really innovative approach to perfumery that I think I hope we'll see more of in the future. Because again, it's that proactive attitude, I think, is again a way of not trying to reach a single destination of just focusing and picking at all the bad parts of the industry, but having a direct approach of working towards decolonizing a method and practice, rather than seeing it as one final place to reach. Is something we have to constantly work towards. So I think, Nuri, what you're doing is a really great step in that direction. But yeah, I mean, total transparent, there's different trends everywhere, you know?
Yeah,
I think overall I think you're right in that it's almost like perfume for the last 10 years has become very abstract. It's how can we make it as linear, once again, linear as possible. The idea of it having this arc and you're having this experience with your perfume that should change over time. People really don't want that. They also want a lot of longevity. Yeah, to the point it's just like it's you're spraying it on your body. It has alcohol on it. There's only how long I can keep it on your skin, because it just, you hear people talking about they want 36, 48 hours of a product remaining and the same, which is not how nature works. This feels unnatural. It always feels kind of these kind of modern fragrances that always give a very clean smell. Sort of pleasant. They're pleasant. They're pleasant smells. They're like pop music. They're white noise smells. I also think that this is also kind of a trend, though. I think it's going to be the same equivalent to how powdery fragrances were in like the 60s, and that people will smell these very linear, very kind of abstract, single molecule fragrances and be like, oh my God, my grandmother smells like that. In 30 years, this will be the grandma smell.
It'll become very dated.
But here in the Middle East, we're still going real hard on woods. Big, loud, long, still a lot of musk, a lot of woods. Oud is more popular than ever in regions where it previously wasn't. In Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, that really wasn't an oud area, and now everybody's wearing oud, and it's like, okay, all right, it's the Gulf all of a sudden. So we're even having cross references of fragrance because of these movings in the market, because that wasn't part of our scent tradition to the extent it was in the Gulf. But we're still pretty big and pretty loud over here. So we're definitely not like linear and clean and soft.
You really want your presence known in a given space. I would say similar in Kenya.
Which is which is very different from, for instance, China. And both Middle Eastern brands and Western brands have had a really hard time accessing China because they want their scents to be very close to the body and very low. So it should be nice and it should be pleasant, but it should be very, very close. And if not intrusive, you need to think of other people when you're scenting yourself. And that's not the way we approach product in most countries, especially in the French kind of standardized way of looking at perfume. So it's a communist way of approaching fragrance, and we're not prepared for that.
Fascinating study into like the way people engage in societies through the way they wear their fragrances. Well, I think maybe my final question, and this is just more, I'm curious to see where you guys began, but why did you begin entering into this work, and what compels you to say continue working in it?
Ezra, you want to go?
I can go. I always really appreciated just the sense of smell. I'm terrible notoriously at forgetting people's names, but I like weirdly remember how their house smelled or something like that. If I ever smell it again, it's, oh, that's that place. And it was again kind of through a small retail experience after that, finding my way into a laboratory and trying to understand fragrance, perfumery as this kind of design mechanism. And it was definitely a situation of I didn't know what I didn't know at the beginning. I think I couldn't conceive what the role or the job of a perfumer to be a real thing, let alone how complicated it is. But I think that's the kind of the challenge that draws me back to it. A is the kind of design method of trying to create a shape that you can't touch or see and like project that into someone's memory or someone's imagination is always like interests me, just as that is like what it is, what it does in the body. But I think also again, just wanting to find another way to tell stories, like how I've worked with people in the past, like the best collaborations I've done so far. One with an artist called Shumba Masai, who's from Zimbabwe originally and moved to England some years ago. We were working on a project with him for one of his events, for a show that he did, a music show, and I went to him and like showing different materials to him. He was coming up with he had memories, nostalgic responses, and the vocabulary he was using was so different to what I'd experienced in the lab environment. And it really made me, it really just drove me. And in the end, we ended up making this very interesting mix of what was essentially super nostalgic smells for him, which he described as like red brick and petrichor from mud lifting, combined with like really metallic, like kind of cold, hard structures. So we wanted to try and make this kind of like a satellite, essentially, like flying around like Sunrise, Jupiter. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that pushes me, is storytelling, I think, and trying to elevate voices that haven't had a platform so far. That's what pushes me further anyway. I'm super excited by exploring that space. But yeah, Nori.
Yeah.
That's amazing, by the way. We're going to make satellite to Saturn. Excellent. I love it. So for me, I'd say like my first experience with perfume was really, I think, telling in the long run. I was begging my parents for years for it. I wanted perfume. I wanted to be a grown-up. I was one of these kids who was 37. And they finally capitulated when I was 8, and they bought me a bottle of Baby Soft, which is pink and smells like baby powder. It is like the kiddie perfume. And I sprayed it and I was like, I'm a grown up. I'm grown. And it was just this amazing ability to reframe my reality without changing anything tangibly. But because I felt that way, because I had this smell, because I had this ritual of applying this perfume, it meant so much to me. And I was just a big fan of perfume. I bought a lot of perfume. I had a big collection. I was interested in it. But it was years later. I am a member of a Hedra Kadisha, which is a burial society. It's a Jewish burial society, which is a burial society. It's a Jewish burial society that we take care of our own within our community. So we don't charge people. We don't have for-profit funeral homes. We take care of our own people inside the community. It's a wonderful model, a communal model, to say that, this matters too much to be something to make profit off of. And I had a family that was insisting that the final ablution of the body of the person who had died should be with rose water. They were from Iraq. They were Iraqi Jews, and they wanted to have rose water because that was part of their tradition. So there was some argument over whether or not we should do it. And so I got actually called in because I knew the rules better. And I was like, no, we can do it. We'll do the rose water. But it really got me thinking, like, who is this rose water for? Like, she's dead. She's not enjoying this rose water. We're functioning here. This is not for our pleasure. So who is this rose water for? What is the function that this is doing? And that just started me down a path that's very strange and weird. And it was always sent through people, sent through culture, sent through expression. And eventually got to a point where it's like, well, I have to learn how to do it. I can't just talk about it in abstract terms. I have to make these things. And I think that's also why a lot of the things I make are much more traditional, because I'm looking at tradition and I'm looking at culture. So I tend to move a little bit slower, maybe a little bit more old fashioned, but it's always been through the lens of society. So that's kind of how I got into things, which is not the usual way.
That's a wonderful story. Fantastic. I think you touched on something really important, that it's always sent through you can't have it without sort of experiencing it. It's as a sense, but it also like it continuously engages within certain other spheres, communities, societies, cultures.
It's funny because it kind of acts like an echo, but it's also a glue, I think, to like making kind of putting our senses together. So it is the kind of like after impression, whether that's, you know, felt internally as like a nostalgic thing, or if it's from someone else's echo of being in a space, or you having been in a space. But it is also, yeah, that kind of glue that solidifies, you know, felt phenomena. Which I just think, yeah, again, this aside from industry and aside from some as a sense, and how, as Nuri was saying, it has so many links to life practices, to death practices, to just cultures. Yeah, I find that incredible, and communicating that as a really interesting device. Sorry, 1 second.
But also for you, what made you interested in wanting to pursue the ideas around scent and design, or scent and process, the way you approach it? Because you have a very different
well, I mean,
platform that you're coming from than me.
I think to add to you, like when I was younger, I kept collecting perfume bottles, and it was as well, you know, 12, but I want to be, you know, like a gentleman, or sexy. I don't know. Can you do that? Yeah, maybe. So there was a lot of that sort of collecting, and I think the whole time I've always been interested in how places smell, and they really ground me back into something. And I think if you're moving around a lot, scent is also like a very important thing related to that. But I think with design, at least initially, as like the work I'd been seeing or the research that was being done into scent, it just seems so sterile. And we can design this, like it's super directional. And also, I think back to this like lack of criticality related to it, but then also just the way that our environments did smell before. And I think, especially in the Netherlands, I think that's where I got interested in it, because of how deodorized the Netherlands is through a lot of processes of design. And I questioned or wondered, what have we lost in that process of what we can't smell anymore? Which is related to the way the economy has changed, also maybe related to the way people engage in different social practices. And yeah, so I think that's, yeah, initially where I came from. And then I think, again, to add, it was also, and you said something really wonderful, sculpting with memories. I really love this idea that you could play around with something, and that everyone would have a different experience towards it, but that you would feel something related to it. It sort of brings a level of humanity to it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that was great.
I think it's something to do with it.
So now mute yourself, Serge. Ooh, smile. Remember the smile.
You can feel what's an
restart.
I
haven't seen it.
I enjoyed it.
And you're just gonna restart. Turn it off and on again. Okay. Uf, qué miedo.
Spikes. Stretch. Pull it. Spread. Interaction. Unfold. Play. Pull. Turn. Reflexes. Spy. Suspect. Spy. Climb. Closer. Spiky. Invite. Closer. Further. Smoother. Pulling and pushing. Inviting. Collaborating. Interacting. Pull it. Entering. Merging. Enter. Feeling. Absorb. Merge. Reach. Pull. Caressing. Further. Closer. Away. Come. Up. Enough. No. Bounce. Bounce. Up. Bounce. Float. Away. Bounce. Fly. Away. Bump. Away. Cloud. Reach. Bounce. Push. Go. 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 Stop. Push it. Boundary. Effort. Escape. Hiding. No. Away. Reach. Reach away. Over. Stretch. Reach. Press. Clogged. Clog. Free. Go. Hope. Down, cluttered. Invite, clogged. Drained, clogged. Crumb drained. Heavy, heavy. Bored. Still, small. Crumbled. Tiny. Still. Alone, me, not me, not. And back, come back, up, hope. There, live, go.
In the boundless extension of the world we live in, we do not necessarily believe in everything we see and get described, but still, we listen to accounts enabling us to discern the tracery of subtle patterns. What is the object of this reporting? The world? Some specific parts of it? In the beginning, we, as spectators, as people inhabiting the same world, are foreign to most of the mechanism of this world. Most of the time, the language proves to be incomprehensible, but surprisingly enough, some other times, new people, completely ignorant of the established languages, come in expressing themselves with gestures, leaps, cries of wonder or of horror, animal barkings or hootings, or with objects they took from their knapsack, which they arrange like chessmen, leaving open space for interpretation. But obscure or obvious as it might be, everything that is displayed has the power of emblems, a desert of labile and interchangeable data. What is the very first matter of any project? Thoughts, ideas. No matter how distant we travel, we will only tell the thoughts that come to a man who sits on his doorstep in the evening to enjoy the cool air. What is then the use of all this traveling? Wouldn't we be doing the same without moving? Somehow, the more one is lost in unfamiliar quarters of distant places, the more one understands the other places they had crossed to arrive there. Are we then advancing always with our head turned back? An exhibition space is a descriptive space that first of all has all the virtue of being a space you can wander through in thought, become lost, stop and enjoy the cool air, or run off. Exhibitions happen in places that are the work of the mind and of chance, but today neither the one nor the other suffices to hold up their walls. Retaining walls, stone steps descend, they're slippery. The crates are waiting for the departure. The temporality of exhibition is a dominant feature. Projects as exhibitions travel no stop. They know only departures and no returns. But what do they leave behind them? The world has grown too far towards the outside, and if cities cannot turn into kites or mosquito netting, then exhibition at least can try to bring into cities the power of growing in lightness, rather than growing endlessly. The different worlds portrayed in exhibitions is nothing apart from the outside world. Only our eyelids separate them. But we cannot know which is inside and which is outside.
Coming for you guys.
How do you go so fast, Bianca?
I need to find you because I'm the camera.
Yeah, but I don't know how to find my way.
Okay, tell me what you see.
I see nothing. I see a horizon. Bianca found me.
But I saw Bianca like 1 minute ago. Now she disappeared. Okay, I'm in this tower. I'm in this tower on top of it. In this tower in the middle of everything, like next to the bump sign.
There. Okay, let's teleport to. Where do you wanna go? Do you guys wanna? We're gonna do the dreams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even Miguel brought the.
But maybe is it cool if we start at like in the this kind of square, center square, and then we teleport already?
Yeah, I think
then
so.
let's go.
Anyway, I'm the weirdo of Bump Galaxy. So, tell us a little bit more about this place.
So this is just the lobby. This is a central island, basically where everyone spawns when they first enter the galaxy, for the first time. And like where you guys ended up, this is the information pavilion, basically. So all the commands that you need to play in the server, frequently asked questions, information about care practitioners, rules. Just if you want to learn any info that you might think is important, you can find there. But if you come down here,
coming.
Where is Marta? Marta!
Coming. I'm behind you.
Marta?
Who did I give the potion to?
This place is beautiful. Ooh.
Where is Marta? Marta!
Coming. I'm behind you.
Marta?
Who did I give the potion to?
This place is beautiful. Ooh. Ah, nice. And now I guess I press 3. Potion of nausea.
Yes.
Okay.
Right
click.
Yeah. Right click and press it for a long time.
It doesn't.
I think you're left clicking. I think you're left clicking.
I don't think so. I mean, I have a trackpad, so I'm not super sure how.
Oh, you need a mouse.
Marta!
No! But how are you doing it?
I have a mouse.
So, oh no.
Oh no.
Okay, I will never be able to drink this. For the next chapter, I will bring my. Forest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sand dunes. Sand dunescape.
Yeah.
Woo. And it's sunny here.
Yeah, this is the kind of entry area to the sand dune dreamscape. Over here, in this chest, you can find book and quills. So you should probably take one.
Okay. And then this is a book, I guess, with resources on the books.
Well, it's just like about the commons. Like if you right click on it, you can just what it's about and what you're supposed to be doing here. But yeah, this brown chest, right click on it, open the chest, and
take a book. I took a book.
Take a book. Awesome, yeah, great.
Cool.
Perfect. Let's go somewhere.
Yeah, we follow you. You know the most beautiful places in this world. Whoa. In this galaxy, actually.
Okay, cool.
Ah, it's huge, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty big. It takes like 15 minutes to walk from one end.
No way. So we're going to that pyramid? Looks like.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We can do it there.
I'm lost.
You're really lost? Yeah.
Are you lost?
Yeah.
Warp. I know.
No.
So, and there's no maps, huh?
Where is the sun? Let me look at the sun. Ah! Who did that? Ah!
Me.
Wow! Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm back, bitches! Hola, Marta.
Okay, let's enter.
Okay. We can go inside. But what did you ask? You asked something.
What is this sound? Ooh.
Oh. Ah.
Ooh, I don't see anything. Ah, Miguel Parra, here you are. Wow. Okay, I'm here. Uncomfortable laughter.
Look up, Marta. Look up. Look up. Yes.
I see you. Okay. Ah, vale. All right. You want
Is
to
there
tell us a
music?
bit about your dreams, Miguel?
No, Bianca is gonna guide us.
Ah,
Yeah,
but
that's
we don't have
really-
to talk about our dreams then. We're just gonna meditate on the dreams. But anyway, I'll follow you.
So what we're gonna do is I'll do a really quick guided meditation, dream reflection. I'll do a really quick guided dream reflection. So I'll be asking you guys questions and just answer them in your head. And then after that, we'll bring up the books, and then you guys will journal anything that comes up, type down anything that comes up while I'm doing the guided dream reflection, while I'm asking you questions, and then we can talk about it later.
Yeah.
Does that sound
good?
Cool. Okay.
Much
Okay.
better. Yeah.
Okay, you guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just close your eyes. And take a deep breath in for a count of 6. And exhale for a count of 6. And just continuing this pattern until you're fully relaxed. And just bringing to mind the most recent dream you had, or one that struck you the most and you want to reflect on. Just bringing it forward and just bringing to mind the most recent dream you had, or one that struck you the most and you want to reflect on. Just bringing it forward like it's being projected before your eyes. Like you're watching it like a movie. And now think of the answers to some of the questions I'll ask. And remember to just trust your intuition. So bringing to mind your dream, remembering your dream, bring your attention to yourself. Were you experiencing the dream in first person, or were you watching it from a distance?
Is it a question?
For yourself.
Yes, but just think about it. Think about the answer. And just continuing to breathe and thinking about the dream. You can even reach out with your hands and grab the image of that dream, like you're rolling it into a ball. holding it in your palms, bringing it close to you, and thanking it for serving you. And then letting it go. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, and we can journal everything that we learned or discovered. You guys okay?
Ay, that was
How are you
really
feeling?
relaxing.
Yeah? That's nice. That's great. Good to hear.
Oh, I'm still here. I'm fine. I got elevated. Oh,
Oh,
my
yeah.
god, higher
Oh my
consciousness.
god.
I have to say I don't dream a lot.
Kidding? Yeah. No, I said that's a pity, but journaling helps you remember your dreams better.
Yeah, look at him.
It's a nice
Show
exercise.
Bianca.
Oh wow.
It's a dream diary.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
We see you where Central Archive? No.
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 Standard dreamscape.
Central Dune, Sand Dune Dreamscape.
Ah, back. Ooh. Uy. Ah, okay. All right.
Oh, yes.
And now we can just publish our journal.
In the repository, Dream
Yeah.
Journal. Do it, Miguel, because
So,
mine is.
By the way, Miguel, if you want to
It's
keep
here.
it private and you don't want anyone to read it, you can put in the blue
No,
chat.
I'm okay.
But
I can go
if
public.
you're okay sharing it, yeah. If you want to go public, put in one of the brown chats.
Okay,
Okay.
do
It
it.
doesn't matter which one.
Okay, this one. Small one.
Wait,
I like
where
this.
are you? I need to record you doing this.
Cool.
Marta.
Joder, ¿dónde estás? I cannot fly now. Ah. Where? Ah.
Repository.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after putting the journal in the chest, you can pass through this tunnel.
I have to say I don't dream a lot.
Kidding? Yeah. No, I said that's a pity, but journaling helps you remember your dreams better.
Yeah, look at him.
It's a nice
Show
exercise.
Bianca.
Oh wow.
It's a dream diary.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
We see you where Central Archive? No.
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 Standard dreamscape.
Central Dune, Sand Dune Dreamscape.
Ah, back. Ooh. Uy. Ah, okay. All right.
Oh, yes.
And now we can just publish our journal.
In the repository, Dream
Yeah.
Journal. Do it, Miguel, because
So,
mine is.
By the way, Miguel, if you want to
It's
keep
here.
it private and you don't want anyone to read it, you can put in the blue
No,
chat.
I'm okay.
But
I can go
if
public.
you're okay sharing it, yeah. If you want to go public, put in one of the brown chats.
Okay,
Okay.
do
It
it.
doesn't matter which one.
Okay, this one. Small one.
Wait,
I like
where
this.
are you? I need to record you doing this.
Cool.
Marta.
Joder, ¿dónde estás? I cannot fly now. Ah. Where? Ah.
Repository.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after putting the journal in the chest, you can pass through this tunnel, this resource tunnel over here.
Okay. Miguel? Okay. Alright, do it. Put your dream.
How do I? Did I do it?
I think.
Yeah. If you open the chest and then
Woohoo!
drag
But
the
is it
books
this
from
one?
your inventory to the chest.
Ah, Saigon, this one.
Yeah.
Chest.
Oh, no, you're breaking it. You're breaking it.
Ah, okay.
Oh yeah, I see it. I think I see it.
Now it's done, no?
But it's not public.
Is it?
Now.
No, it's not.
I think
you
it
have
is.
to drag it inside.
But I already put it inside, like here on my.
You put it
No,
inside.
it's in your hand.
I think you're still holding one.
Cause I opened like a, now I can see like a frame.
Ah, sí,
Yeah.
sí, sí.
It says
So if
inventory.
you see it, like if you see the frame,
Ah, you have to do
there's
this.
in your inventory, like in the bottommost books, you
Yeah.
can drag the books.
To the chest. To the
So I
chest.
think you just took one out, but then, yeah, there I see it.
Ah.
But then is that the one that you signed? Because it's not like purple.
Yeah.
It would be purple. There. Okay, got
That's
it.
that.
I see Saigon.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
There we go.
Ah.
Yeah, and then after that, you can come here and then walk through this tunnel. Walk through here, and it gives you a bunch of resources that you can use to just build anywhere in the landscape.
Oh wow.
So you can build something that maybe represents your dream or anything, literally anything.
That's so cool.
Building blocks of modernity.
Oh my god, I'm really building blocks. Yeah.
Sand geodesign.
Geodesign. We should
so, like,
participate. Do an exhibition here in this
Hey,
world.
sun is rising.
Morning.
Oh my god, that's such a journey. What would you say is the next commons that
We should visit.
we should visit?
You should do? Okay,
Yeah.
next I want to do the snowfield.
See.
I've seen it already. I'm excited for that.
Can we have a sneak peek or is better to save it?
No, Marta, you save it.
But yeah, next time, I mean, this has been nice. I think it has really a lot of potential.
Oh, it's super fun.
Recuerdo los veranos en la playa con mis abuelos. Recuerdo cómo se enfadaba Saturnina porque no la llamaba abuela. Recuerdo viejos, muchos viejos cuando yo era niño. Y recuerdo lo fría que estaba la crema solar en lo bajo de la espalda. Recuerdo cavar hoyos en la arena para enterrar medusas. Y recuerdo ir a la caseta de la Cruz Roja a que me curaran las picadas de medusa. Recuerdo cómo Saturnina me llamaba mi tesoro. ¡Ay, mi tesoro, pero qué guapo que es! ¡Ay, mi tesoro, pero qué le ha picado una medusa! Recuerdo construir castillos de arena con arena mojada y que parecieran montañas de nieve. Recuerdo cómo se disgustó una vecina cuando me vio enterrado bajo la montaña de arena. Recuerdo cómo sonaba la carretera que pasaba al lado de casa de mis abuelos. Recuerdo cerrar los ojos y contar los coches como si fueran ovejas. Recuerdo chuparme el brazo y sentir el agua del mar. Y recuerdo en un poste de la carretera un ramo de flores atado. Recuerdo ser un pirata y buscar entre los cajones un tesoro. Recuerdo 7 nombres en la carretera. Recuerdo encontrar en un cajón recogida de firmas para la exhumación de 7 cuerpos en la carretera. Recuerdo los ronquidos de Saturnina durante la hora de la siesta. recuerdo a mis abuelos durmiendo la siesta con el telediario. Recuerdo ese encuentro.
En España está más vivo por muertos que ningún recuerdo una alegría para todos, una última para todos. Recuerdo se termina el y esto lo saben hasta los miedos.
Promover la recuperación de la memoria histórica de los desaparecidos durante la Guerra Civil y la posguerra.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded live stream. My name is Michael Boykowski, and this is the first in 2 videos where I'm taking a thesis project that I produced called Made of Stories and aiming to produce a sort of summary or a neat cohesive sort of explanation of the themes and ideas behind the thesis, with the goal of creating like a performative lecture, which will be the second part in this 2-part video project. I'm working in OBS, which is a live broadcasting software, and we have a number of inputs here which we can use. So we've got sort of the big, whoops, wrong way, beginning of a keynote file over here. We've got somewhere to produce a sort of summary or a neat cohesive sort of explanation of the themes and ideas behind the thesis, with the goal of creating like a performative lecture, which will be the second part in this 2-part video project. I'm working in OBS, which is a live broadcasting software, and we have a number of inputs here which we can use. So we've got sort of the big, whoops, wrong way, beginning of a keynote file over here. We've got somewhere to write some text and to work on scripts here, and then over in the far corner we've got a browser in case we want to look stuff up on the web. And we also have a camera just down here for if we want to make notes, we can scribble stuff down here. And also this is just to give you an idea of former iterations of the thesis so far. It's actually produced as a printed publication. You can see here, you can have a flick through. The goal is sort of like to expand on this as well and create a second version of this publication. But for now we're just going to sort of go through various material and see what we can come up with as far as producing a performative lecture style thing. So actually maybe it's good to look at the book for a sec. So the thesis is broken into sort of 3 main areas. Actually, maybe this is good. See if they're in here. You can see this is a work in progress. So one of the areas is nuclear semiotics. To explain nuclear semiotics as simply as possible, this is actually the name for a series of projects Let's get the browser working. Maybe we can look up nuclear semiotics in the browser too. I think, so this is Arena. If you don't know what Arena is, it's a place for collecting references and research. And in here, if I go to the index, I should have something about nuclear semiotics. So this video is also sort of a way to expose the research and building up of design research materials and how that comes together. Partially because you know, within Moving and Status and within a lot of the work produced by Design Academy students, there are quite a few areas that deal with immateriality, and the big question is then, like, how do you then show it? So this is also an attempt to sort of deal with this idea of how do you communicate and share the immaterial, rather, instead of having a physical object to exhibit or to manifest, how do you then express what you've been doing? So I'm looking for nuclear semiotics. I'm just sort of scrolling blindly. Here it is. So I'm looking for just a really neat explanation which I can incorporate into this performative lecture. I'm also based in Australia, so sometimes the internet connection is not fantastic. Where's the nearest? This might be a good place to start. A nuclear warning design. So you might, the first time I heard about nuclear semiotics was through a podcast that was talking about these design projects. I don't want to sign up to your newsletter. That were initiated sort of in the, I think it was in the 80s and the 90s. And they were looking at how to express places where nuclear waste is hidden for people, you know, 10,000, you know, 100,000, you know, 1 million years into the future, on the assumption that, might open this up in the thing. Yeah, on the assumption that possibly, you know, there might not be the same language being spoken. Lingua franca, is that an expression people are familiar with? Maybe I'll type it in here. I think it's lingua franca. That doesn't look like lingua anything. We will look this up in our browser. So if I open another window, this multi-channel form of broadcasting is still something I am experimenting with, so it's probably a bit janky. So lingua franca pretty much means the accepted most common language at a particular time. Well, that's what the expression has come to mean. That's how we use, or a lot of people use it at the moment. So like in the Netherlands, for instance, an international, or a school that professes to be an international school, will speak English, or will have English as the primary language that everybody shares, and you'll be expected to be able to speak English to continue the course. So at some point, English was determined to be this most common language that could easily be shared amongst people from many different backgrounds. So English, in this case, is the lingua franca. Nuclear semiotics assumes that that's not something that's going to last forever, that lingua francas change. And we can't assume that in that case, even written language or spoken language will be the same as it is now. We just cannot assume how we communicate now will be the same as how we communicate in the future. At the same time, these projects don't aim to speculate on what could be understood in the future. It's more, these projects are more of an exercise in trying to imagine ways we can communicate now that will be understood in the future. So if I go back to Keynote, did I have some examples? I did not. I'm just like zooming through the three main parts of what we're talking about. I think we'll stay on nuclear semiotics for now and we'll go back to the browser. What is it doing? So, nuclear warnings. Oh yeah, so I had this image up on screen. So this image in the corner here, turn my camera on and I can point to it for you. So here, like disembodied hand. It feels very awkward trying to point in this way. Maybe we can make this bigger. Let's make this a bit bigger. That's better. Okay. So this was a project that suggested that certain plants could be bred that were a really unusual color. And the color, I think the idea was that the color reacted to radioactive material. So anywhere there was radioactive material, I think the idea was that the color reacted to radioactive material. So anywhere there was radioactive material buried or nuclear waste, these plants would be a certain color and a really unusual resting color. And this was thought to be a way that maybe we could communicate to people in the future that there was something different going on here, that there was something underneath here that was affecting the way the plants were growing. Then we flick through some more of these. So there was a couple of these nuclear semiotics programs that were initiated. I'll open up this image as well. So this is a illustration by Michael Brill and Safta Abidi. Where is it? So this was a suggestion to build a spike field. So to build some sort of structure over the top of where the nuclear waste was buried that was very striking and arresting in an alarming sort of way. So this was a way of saying danger, like there's something going on in this area, keep away, by having this sort of field of spikes sticking up everywhere. The nuclear semiotics projects are interesting because although it was initiated by the US Department of Defense, actually no, it wasn't nuclear, it was, correction, it was the US Department of Energy who are continuing to look after this problem of nuclear waste in terms of where to put it and then how to let people know that it's there. And like obviously there's nuclear facilities all over the world, so these nuclear semiotics projects were particular to the US Department of Energy and to the United States in particular. But yeah, they invited people from a range of skills and backgrounds. So it wasn't necessarily scientists, it was like illustrators and science fiction writers and illustrators, architects. It was not your usual set of thinkers. One of the references I found really useful is wonder, maybe I can bring it up in another tab. So you might have heard of this idea of deep time. I wonder if this will bring up an image of the book that I'm thinking of. I feel like I've put a picture of it somewhere. Okay, this isn't showing us the book. There's a book called Deep Time by an author called this is going to test my memory now. It's not Billy Griffiths. Who wrote Deep Time? Let's just put in Deep Time book. Deep Time. Oh man. Okay. We're going to have to refer back to my notes here. I want this particular author because they actually also contributed to some of these nucleosemiotics projects. You know what? It's probably in here. We'll have a flick through this. And when I say this, I mean this. So it turns out that the printed version of the thesis is actually super helpful. And let's have a look at the... Oh my goodness, so we see here Benford Gregory, Deep Time, how humanity communicates across millennia. It's a bit of a dodgy read, like it's probably aged kind of a bit strangely in terms of modern politics and modern ideals, but it's a really solid attempt to look at how human communication has changed, you know, as far back as it can be documented, with the idea that it will change again. You know, so going all the way back to cuneiform, and it'd be great to actually have the book in shot. That's something I haven't really taken into account of how to do. Let me just see if there's a reference in here. Yeah, I mean, maybe in the lecture version of this, I should definitely include, actually I'm going to make that note of that, so include reference to Deep Time book. So this is we've already gone off on a sidetrack, huh? I should try and get us back on track. Let's pop this behind here. Whoops, that's gone too far. And maybe make this a bit smaller. No, that can stay where it is. This I don't think we need so big. Cool. Maybe that goes there, and then that can move over there. Yeah, so to try and surmise this area of the thesis, because this is just one part, you can see it's quite a nebulous part. We're looking at the entire history of human communication and how it's evolved, but also the book Deep Time suggests that it can evolve again. It doesn't say how it's going to evolve again. So it's not speculative at all. It's sort of tried to be, all the nucleosemiotics projects, like they are speculative to a point, I think. So you can imagine them sort of being real. I should mention one more nucleosemiotics project. No, I'm not. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm going to move on. This is sort of a summation to give me an idea of how much or how little we need to include in the presentation. So as I said, Made of Stories is made of stories. It's made of three main stories which kind of tie everything together. The first one is nucleosemiotics. The second field that we tell the story of is linguistic forensics. And this is told via a discussion that was held at a place in Melbourne, Australia, called the Wheeler Centre. Let me see if I've got a description of this event, because that would be super neat. Okay, so here we go. So in a panel discussion entitled Pass It On at the Wheeler Centre in Melbourne, a group of academics and cultural producers met to highlight the many concerns that are needed to be addressed in facing the preservation of language. A key issue was the perceived absence of a shared written vocabulary that was readily available to be documented, archived, and shared. So this is particular to, it's common to areas where there has been that was readily available to be documented, archived, and shared. So this is particular to, it's common to areas where there has been indigenous population or Aboriginal population that that has sort of had to go through some sort of colonizing period. This in Australia, it's particular because there used to be a lot of different language groups for the Aboriginal population spread out across the continent. And through various colonial and potentially genocidal activities, this map here was just like completely sort of not completely, but these different languages groups are all sort of split up and moved around, and some were lost, some were depleted of people that actually could speak the languages. So there's a common map that you can download, which is in the thesis. It's called the AIAT SIS organization map of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander language groups. The map itself is problematic because it follows Eurocentric mapping traditions down to the colors that are used to represent the different areas on the map. And it also assumes that that each language group had very definite sort of borders and hence a sense of ownership. I feel like most Eurocentric maps, the types of maps that are common, that were spread throughout the world at a certain time, they mostly speak of ownership. They speak of geopolitical concerns, and they speak of this country owns this, you know. Whereas when you're talking about language groups, I feel like it's a more sort of nebulous, or maybe the boundaries are not as neat and tidy, and like how much is language about ownership, I guess? How much of communication is about saying what is whose and what belongs to who? This was my reinterpretation of the language groups map for Australia, where it just sort of tried to do a version that blurred the boundaries and didn't make them so concrete. So yeah, the issue that this group were discussing in this panel were what to do about preserving the languages that could be preserved, but also like how to capture those that were potentially lost or about to be lost due to, you know, depleted numbers of people that could speak those languages, you know. And the topic moved on to this idea of, before you can preserve a language, you have to identify it and define it, and a few of the members of this group were talking about having dictionaries for different language groups, and that this was maybe a sign when something was able to be preserved, if there was a dictionary of it. So yeah, there was a lot of talk. It's a nice diagram. A lot of talk about preservation of particular words and ways of saying things, and words that might mean different things in different to different language groups, etc., etc. The common thread was that, and this is something that it tends to be a colonialized story of Indigenous or Aboriginal peoples having stories to tell of that sort of sustained knowledge. So storytelling was seen as a type of communication. I mean, when that's discussed in colonial terms, it can be sort of infantilizing of Aboriginal Indigenous cultures, that there was only storytelling and there wasn't this complexity of language, which language preservation and forensics is attempting to capture, and represent. There's a reference in here. Let me find it. I'm using my phone a lot, I've realized. This is an experiment, this format. Let's see if I can find the rainbow serpent. I think I took it out because I was worried about that infantilizing aspect. I did. So when I was a child, there was a book that won the Children's Book Prize when I think I was about 5 years old or something when it won. And it was called The Rainbow Serpent, and it was a storybook illustrated by an Aboriginal artist that told an Aboriginal story of how the world was created. I mean, the amazing thing about The Rainbow Serpent is it was a story that was common across various, or it seemed to be common across various language groups. I can't say that for certain. And it could be read lots of ways. It could actually be read as like a type of mapping or a type of sharing of information pertaining to locations, or like how things were formed or made. It's also a creation story, which is what was the focus of the children's book, I guess. Yeah, I think that the chapter title sort of sums up where I sort of got to in terms of linguistic forensics relating to storytelling and the preservation of language. So when language fails, what's left is the story. And for Aboriginal Indigenous people in this place we currently call Australia, even though that's the colonial name for it, even if the languages are under threat or disappeared or are hard to build a dictionary out of or work out how to preserve, there are stories that were told between language groups that were not only informational but also easily shared and maintained. That was the other thing that you hear too, which I don't know if I covered or not, but I think they discussed in the Pass It On presentation, was this idea of, actually no, it wasn't. So there's a book by an author called Patrick Nunn called The Edge of Memory, where he talks about sort of having a system for sharing and preserving stories. So in his book, Nunn says, many Aboriginal people expressly state the imperative of telling a story the correct way, something that not only ensures its content is accurate, but also that the ownership of the story, how fiction is pieced together, how narration is expressed. And it's in a really hyper-analytical way, like to the point of like creating these like intricate diagrams that break down words and topics and ideas into their sort of little compartments. There's an amazing. Can you see that in the bottom corner? So this is a story that has been through the narratology ringer. This is a diagram by I guess an academic called Perry Thorndike, and this was a suggestion for ways to interpret literature and storytelling by creating these very elaborate sort of broken down expressions of various pieces of fiction. My favorite thing in this diagram is, can you see it? Cat agrees to scratch dog. Dog agrees to bark. Cat scratches dog. There's a monkey and a donkey. So there's a story about a farm and all the things that go on the farm, and it's broken down into like episodes, sub-goals, attempts, outcomes, success. Give milk to cat is a sub-goal. It's like if you read the original thing that this is based on, it's just a straightforward story, but this has been broken down into all its like crazy components. I will read to you a criticism of this attempt, if I can find it. So the realization often made the original literature these structures are based on seem redundant. So once you had this sort of structure, suddenly it was, for some people, it was completely detached from the original text. It had become something completely new, and had become its own particular structure, even though it was based on an original piece of text. So Logan Williams, who was, I think he was part of the like a BuzzFeed program, almost like a type of residency, like a journalism residency. He looked at this diagram and said that it takes a simple story and renders it bewilderingly complex. He sort of was asking, what is gained from interpreting the original literature this way? Or is the structure designed for the story to inhabit a more relevant, useful outcome? So the thing that I thought was interesting and useful about narratology in relation to design was that these structures are designed. They take literature, like there's a lot of, particularly like my background is graphic design, so I sort of look at these narratological structures, and this is another version in the corner here. Sorry, I'll flip to that properly. So this is abstracted to the point where there's no text involved at all anymore. It's literally just this sort of image. I should put this on the front actually. Let's move that to the front and move it up. So you see this, and then this one facing here. To enhance the argument, there was some sort of indication and key on these, and I've taken it off just to show that it's actually called the shape of the story. So this was a group of, they not designers, but academics using design to explore different ways of interpreting stories and narratives, and they came up with this structure that created these sort of crazy, actually quite attractive diagrams. So this is a piece of fiction, or this is a story, and design has been enacted upon this to create this. I have to say at this point that part of my studies have also involved actually writing stories, non-speculative stories. So I won't call them fiction at this stage, although they appear in the guise of fiction. And it was pointed out to me by a lecturer that even though it's not pictorial necessarily, or it's not graphically designed, it's still designed. You know, a story is still designed. Decisions are made as to how a story should evolve, and that creates a design. You describe a character, you've designed a character, you know? As part of this thesis, there are examples of stories as well, and there's a structure for how to create stories that are non-speculative, but also about design research, pretty much full of design research. I probably should have said at the start, actually, the whole thing that propelled this thesis along was the idea that there is just this vast quantity of design projects and the research that supports these projects being produced and not necessarily captured in or transmitted in a way that made the most of the findings of this research, and that I really want to address the churn I think you get from places like Design Academy, where every year there's a whole raft of often amazing projects related to all sorts of amazing research pools that is produced and then sort of cleared away to make way for the next huge raft of certain projects. I mean, thinking about this situation now with the moving in Stasis show and program that we're currently working on, one of the things I've noticed with COVID is that shows and exhibitions have been elongated by being made to sort of be online and interact and be interactive with people online. So a lot of the time frames for exhibitions and shows have been stretched. Even though you can't visit them physically, their embodiment is sort of stretched and elongated. So we have the rare and unusual benefit of being able to show you again what we've been working on and maybe even expand on it, which a lot of years previous wouldn't have had. Like a lot of those research assignments lived and died within the space of a year. Yeah, and you know, it becomes up to the individual how much they want to sort of push or propel a project often, and a project might be really valid or useful, or it might be relevant to somebody else's field that helps enlighten it or expand it, but if that project isn't allowed to be transmitted or shared or archived or kept, then it sort of disappears into the ether. Probably the other thing that Made of Stories wanted to address was also the overdependence on material culture. I understand material can mean many things now. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean to be physical material. I'm talking in terms of project outcomes that you can
chiuso dal nostro audio.
Ma tu la senti?
Ah no. Adesso?
No.
Aspetta.
And start now, instead of a sigh, make it into a kind of sound. Really fast or really slow. Okay, and now when we breathe in, focus again to just bringing the air down to the bottom of the stomach. And just breathe normally again, no sound. Now from here, I want you to start to giggle, like make a laugh that you put in the bottom of your belly. So really, yeah, focus the laugh there. You can put your hand on your stomach so you can kind of feel it moving. That might help to place it down there. And now start to bring the laugh up to your throat. So it can go slowly up from the lower belly to the throat. And back down again and up and down. I find it fun also to like bounce from the left to the right of my body as I go up and down. Because I think generally I'm lopsided. So you can also, like a little bouncing ball, bounce it across. And when it reaches your throat, also bounce it between the left and the right side of your throat. Play with making it louder, softer. You can start to go up to the top of your head, keep on moving it around. Really feel it in your chest and all that resonance. Keep on moving it. Maybe you can make it really, really quiet. Change the speed, make it bigger, smaller, move it to the left side of your body. Move it in the right side of your body. Really, really up high in between your eyebrows. To the back of your throat, maybe to the back of your head. Down your spine. To the left hip. To your right hip. Back in the middle. Ow. Ow! Really play around with what feels good and where it feels nice. Gradually come back down and come back to breathing. Breathing into your lower belly. So while you rest there, I'm now going to introduce Joan LaBarbera's, they're called Voice Piece, One Note Internal Resonance Investigation. And this was a practice that she developed about resonance areas and the placement of sound in these different resonance areas. So I'm going to read her instructions. The following are descriptions of resonance areas placed in a specific order for performance, with drawings indicating exact placement of sound. The vocalist should think of the sound as a solid object, a ball, and imagine that ball in each indicated area before activating the sound producing mechanism. I recommend closing the eyes during performance and when initially locating specific resonance areas, since one is able to focus sound more accurately when not visually distracted, and fine-tuning of pitch and placement is more precise. Vocalists should choose a comfortable pitch which can be placed in the maximum number of resonance areas. Always think the sound in a specific place before starting each sound. Each area should be identified individually for the length of a short breath. Silent spaces in between sounds allow time for the vocalist to concentrate mentally on the next area while replenishing air supply. The vocalist should not use vibrato at any time. The sound is to be clear, clean, and specific. So I'm going to take you through these different areas. I'm going to just tell you the areas first, and then instruct us to start making sounds in those areas. And as Joan LaBarbera said, when we start to make the sounds, visualize the sound as a little ball that you're moving between the different places. And we'll make one sound in one area, then I'll tell you the next area, and before we make the sound in that area, we'll move this ball of sound in our minds to that area. So the areas, the sequence of the areas are the center of your mouth, the front of the lips, just behind, front of the mouth, just behind the lips, the lower front nose, the center of the nose, the bridge of the nose, and then the upper throat, kind of when you're yawning. Now do a yawning. That bit at the top of the yawn, that's the last place. So just quickly again, it's center of mouth, front of mouth, lower nose, middle of the nose, the bridge of your nose, and the back of your throat. So keep your lips closed, and we're going to go to the first area, which is the center of the mouth. So visualize the ball of sound there. Then we're going to breathe in all together. Make the sound with imagining it in the center of your mouth. And the next place we're going to go is the front of the mouth. So breathing in, move the ball of energy there, and make the sound now at the front of the mouth, just behind the lips. And now to the lower nose. Now to the bridge of the nose. In between your eyebrows. Oh, whoops, sorry, I forgot region. Sorry, yeah, in between the eyebrows. And the last place is the back of the throat, whereas if you're yawning. Okay, so we do that sequence again. So as I said, the ball of sound is moving to each area before you make the sound. So let's go center of the mouth, breathing in. Now move it to the front of your mouth. Move to the lower nose. To the middle of the nose, center of the nose. And now to the bridge of your nose and between your eyebrows. And now the back of the throat. So now instead of doing the breathing in and then doing the areas individually, I'm now going to take you through the areas. So do it all in one breath. And as you move it through, keep on moving the ball through. But I'm not going to sing just so I can instruct you the areas. But so starting in center of the mouth, we'll breathe in. Now move it to the front of your mouth, to your lips. Now to your lower nose. Now to the middle of your nose. Now to the bridge of your nose. Now to the back of your throat. So do that again. If you have to take a break in between to breathe, that's fine. But try now, maybe if you know the sequence, I'd say the sequence again, but just keep on flowing through that sequence in one breath in your own time. So center of the mouth, front of the mouth, lower nose, bridge, middle of your nose, in between your eyebrows, and the back of your throat. So keep on going through. I'm also going to just do it in my own time, but go through. As you do this, you might be able to start to hear the kind of different quality of the sound as you do it. I think maybe I find wearing headphones good for this because you kind of block out everything else and you really just go inside your head, which is quite useful. But I think even with the earphones, maybe you can probably do it as well and hear it as well. So still imagining this sound as a ball, and you can start to change. Maybe you can do it in a circle. So you go from the mouth to the nose to the back of the throat and then back. Taking a breath in between, doing it as fast or slow as you like. You can also start to play with the order. Maybe you don't want to do that sequence in order. So maybe you want to go from the back of the throat to the lower nose. Start to swap between the places and see how that feels. Also going to introduce a new area where we can go, which is the cheekbones. And this one, like when you put the sound there, raise your cheeks as if you're kind of scrunching your face. That one I like to, so maybe start by placing the sound in between your eyebrows and then go to the high cheeks and just move between those two places, the ball of sound. So starting in between your eyebrows. Not your cheeks, cheekbones. Maybe go back down to your throat, to your mouth. Hopefully you're starting to like be able to visualize a kind of a line within your head of where the sound is going. I'm going to add a few more areas and then we can start to open our mouth. So far we've got the center of the mouth, the front of the mouth, lower nose, middle nose, cheekbones, in between the eyebrows. Now I'm going to do the top of the head, the back of the head, and we have the upper throat already, but then also the front and the back of the throat. So let's go, first of all, let's start with the front of the throat. So place this ball of sound there. Now move it to the back. Swap between the two. Now move it up to the lower nose. Your cheekbones, in between your eyebrows, to the top of the head, like kind of above you, now to the back of your head, to the back of the yawning place, back of the upper throat. You can take breaths whenever you need. Upper back throat, go back to the back of the head and up to the top. Come to your cheekbones. Moving to the lower nose. So now with these different areas, just keep on playing around and moving the sound in between for a minute or two, just to familiarize yourself with the new ones. So the top of the head, the back of the head, and the front and the back of the throat, and still include the ones that we did before. Maybe there's one that you find really hard to place the sound there. You can also just concentrate on that one. If there's any one where you like can't really feel that the sound is going to that place, because the aim is to really feel like vibration of that sound. So yeah, maybe there's one, pick it, fix on one that you found hard to find and just keep on placing the sound there and concentrate on it there. You can move it around again. Maybe you want to try another area that was feeling tricky. Now we're going to start, instead of having our lips closed, we're going to start doing it with our lips open, and making any sound that comes, maybe the sound changes. But we're going to do a sequence. So starting in the center of the mouth to the front of the mouth, lower nose, middle nose, cheekbones, in between your eyebrows, up to the top of your head, to the back of your head, the upper throat, the back of the throat, the front of the throat, and then back to the center of the mouth. So kind of do a loop around your head, contour of your head as such. And change the vowel. I'm gonna see just what comes. I don't there's not a specific one you need to do, or I haven't found one that I particularly like, but so okay, let's start in the center of the mouth. Move it to the front, the lower nose, high cheekbones, in between the eyebrows, to the top of the head, back of the head, upper throat, lower, the back of the throat, the front of the throat. So now do that in your own time. And if you want to change the order, it doesn't have to be exactly that. So there's no right or wrong. Just play around and see what vowels, how the vowels change and how it feels in different places. You can change the order if you want to go backwards. Zip between the areas, doesn't have to be in a circle, whatever feels good, but I'm going to keep on going in a circle because that felt quite nice for me. I don't know if this is coming across through the microphone, but I can start to hear the harmonics coming out a little bit. I don't know if any of you are also experiencing that. But specifically, I'm finding it when I'm going up the nose and then when I'm coming round the back. So I tried to do it again and make it a bit louder. Maybe it will come across, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear through the mic. But if you're feeling it, also keep on playing with that and see if there are ways to make it louder, or to, if you catch them, you might just catch them very slightly, but you'll start to hear a higher frequency. So maybe you can hear them there. It's going up. And the way I find, I don't know if you're finding you're hearing that in yourself, a way, it's like I keep my lips quite pursed. So I don't, like quite, like you're kind of holding them quite tightly as I go up, and that seems to be able to capture the harmonic. So I'm still just moving through the areas. Maybe you could hear that one there. Okay, maybe we can actually just try and just do harmonics. Just these are some exercises I found on YouTube, and you go from the vowel U to E, or you can go from E to U. For me, from U to E, I find to get the harmonic. The other way around doesn't work, but maybe for you, it might be the opposite. So just going to transition very slowly from an U to an E vowel, and keep the sound very much at the front of your lips. So, ooh. I'm going to go a bit higher actually because I'm singing really low. I've just realized. But whatever note you're on, You can also change the pitch, because that can also maybe change what you hear. Ooh, ooh. So you can go between oo and ni, keeping your lips very pursed, and you can move back and forth. Go really, really slowly first. Ooh. And maybe along the way, if you go really, really slowly, there might be one point where you start to hear a harmonic. So kind of keep on shifting between the oo and the e until you find that, or maybe you want to go e to oo. Ooh. So I can hear them really, really faintly. I haven't done overtone singing for a while, so I think I'm having to relearn it again. And this is also, these are the kind of exercises you can do in your own time to, I was kind of doing them daily in Spain, and I got better and could hear much more. And also just really playing around and like going to different parts of so all the different resonance areas that we explored, you could also try and place the sound there and then make the vowel sound with your lips. So now I'm gonna, for example, I'm gonna place the sound at the back of my throat and then make an oo to e sound. Maybe you can try doing it in the middle of your mouth. Again, I don't know if it's coming across on the microphone, but I can just hear them. That was one way of doing the overtone that I found online. Also, another one was you make an om sound, and then you go om to and then oo. So, and it's kind of in the middle of your mouth. So just listen first. You go om. So you're kind of going om, o, and transitioning between those three very slowly. Try that and see. So yeah, om to like ng, and then oo. And normally for me, the harmonics come when I'm transitioning between the to the oo. I just realized my microphone might be really loud when I'm doing this. So I'm sorry if I've been really loud throughout. But yeah, okay. Those two exercises I recommend playing around with. I can also maybe send you guys links after where I found them. But it's really, really fun. I don't know, I find like hearing the overtones of when I sing really, really cool. And like weird how sometimes I can hear them really loudly and sometimes not. And there's this thing, I think she's Austrian singer, where she can like sing whole songs where she's singing in between the harmonics and the note that she's singing, and it's really, really cool. Yeah, maybe just gonna wrap up, but do you want to close your eyes again? Maybe we can just move the sound around our head one more time in a sequence, and then maybe finish. So starting, you can do it with your mouth open or closed, but starting in the mouth and going front of the mouth, nose, middle nose, high cheekbones, between the eyebrows, top of the head, back of the head, back down to the throat. So kind of the one that we've done. Do that in a couple of times to finish. yeah, these have been some internal choreographies, I guess, of where we can place the sound and how we can change how it sounds to us and also how it's heard. Thank you for joining, and thank you to Joan LaBarbara for her instructions. And if you're interested on any of the things, I can send you links, and I've got some photographs of these exercises because it was from a book I can share with you guys as well. Maybe we're going to be cut off on the stream, but maybe we can like chat after, because then we don't have to be live, but we could have a little chat if you guys have time, because that could be nice. Okay, but goodbye, moving in stasis stream. Hopefully we're going to, in 10 seconds. Okay, great. Yes, I'm just going to wait the 10 seconds out because I'm going to get awkward. Okay, cool. I think we're offline now. Yay. So you guys, you can put on your microphones now. How did you find it? I think, can I hear you? Oh yeah. How was it?
It's hard to talk again.
It's quite relaxing, isn't it? That's what I like about it so much. Just like, even when I was talking to you guys and I sometimes open my eyes, but then I just wanted to close them again because it felt really like soothing to have the eyes closed.
Design Paradise. At the beginning, we gathered piles of dirt, chunks of wood, jars of stones. We made simple things, baskets and pouches, cloaks and clubs, huts and sticks, by just adding or subtracting material. One day, we started to mix things. Bronze, the mix of copper and tin, could be poured into forms of clay to make objects. The mold was invented. Molds were the beginning of design. They allowed us to make objects we could not conceive of before. Molds were a milestone of cognition, allowing us to give shapes to abstract thoughts. They opened doors to a new world of materiality, a new field of consciousness. Using objects to make objects, molds were a huge leap in second-order instrumentality. Second-order instrumentality grew and grew and grew, making objects, to make objects, etc., etc. Computers, cars, rockets, clothing, everything. We gain a sense of comfort, of certainty. We have taken objects for granted, but are they really? Objects not only serve needs and perform functions, they have escaped reality to create their own reality. As we have gained consciousness through the objects we made, objects have gained their own consciousness. A second-order consciousness, in which humans are just spectators. Objects are escaping the molds in which they were first made. This is the anti-mold, some kind of hyper-object, the end of design as we know it. The objects evolve in a parallel universe, a design paradise. They do not need a designer or a user. Objects are beings. They are like us. Perhaps better than us. They evolve, transform, combine, connect. creating the most unexpected shapes, unleashing imagination, creating new possibilities for themselves and for humans too, allowing new conditions of living with and without objects.